The antiseptic smell of the hospital corridor burned Daniel's nostrils as he slumped against the wall, his son's small hand clutched in his own. 6 hours they'd been waiting. 6 hours since Noah's fever had spiked to 104, and still no answers. If you've ever felt completely powerless while someone you love suffers, you know exactly what was crushing Daniel's chest in that moment. Stay with me until the end to discover how a chance encounter in this hospital corridor would change everything for this struggling single father. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories that remind us how life can change in an instant. Daniel checked his watch again, 2:17 de la mañana, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making his exhaustion even more pronounced. 8-year-old Noah had finally fallen into a restless sleep across 3 uncomfortable waiting room chairs, his dinosaur pajamas rumpled and his favorite stuffed triceratops tucked under one arm. Mr. Bennett? A nurse appeared with a clipboard. I'm sorry, but we're still waiting on the pediatric specialist. It might be another hour. Daniel nodded, too tired to even feel frustrated anymore. This was his life now, endless waiting, endless worrying, endless struggling to be both mother and father to a little boy who deserved so much more than a dad who could barely keep it together. 3 years had passed since Melissa's car accident, but sometimes it felt like yesterday. The phone call, the rush to the hospital, the doctor's face that told him everything before a single word was spoken. And then suddenly, he was a widower at 32 with a 5-year-old who kept asking when mommy was coming home. Tonight was just another reminder of how inadequate he felt. Noah had been sick for days, but Daniel had been too swamped with work to take him to the doctor earlier. Now here they were, in the emergency room in the middle of the night, because he'd waited too long. Another failure to add to his growing list. He rubbed his eyes, fighting back tears. His construction job barely covered the bills, and he'd probably be fired for missing work tomorrow. The babysitter had already quit last month because he couldn't pay her on time. Everything was falling apart, and he had no idea how to fix it. Excuse me. The voice was soft but commanding. Daniel looked up to see a woman standing before him in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit despite the ungodly hour. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, and even in his exhausted state, he couldn't help but notice how striking she was. Is this seat taken? She asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. No, go ahead, Daniel mumbled, shifting slightly to make room. She sat down with the practiced grace of someone used to commanding boardrooms, her posture perfect even on the uncomfortable hospital chair. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, two strangers in a hospital corridor at 2 de la mañana. Your son, she finally asked, nodding toward Noah. Yeah. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. He's been running a fever for days. It just wouldn't break. The woman's expression softened as she looked at Noah. He has your eyes. Daniel almost corrected her. Noah had Melissa's eyes, not his, but he just nodded instead. What did it matter what a stranger thought? I'm Alexandra Winters, she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. Daniel Bennett. You look like you could use some coffee, Daniel Bennett. Before he could respond, she was on her feet, disappearing down the corridor. Daniel was too tired to even wonder about this strange, elegant woman who had appeared like an apparition in the fluorescent-lit purgatory of the waiting room. 10 minutes later, she returned with 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag. Hospital cafeteria coffee is universally terrible, she said, handing him a cup, but it's hot and it has caffeine. And I found some cookies. They might help your son when he wakes up. Thank you, Daniel said, genuinely touched by the unexpected kindness. That's really nice of you. Alexandra shrugged. I've spent more time in hospitals than I care to remember. You know how it goes. Something in her tone made Daniel look at her more closely. Despite her polished appearance, there were shadows under her eyes, and a tension in her jaw that spoke of her own struggles. Is someone you know here? He asked hesitantly. She stared into her coffee cup. My mother. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They're running some tests, but... She trailed off, and Daniel understood. So many sentences didn't need to be finished. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. Alexandra nodded, then straightened her shoulders, as if physically shaking off vulnerability. The doctors are talking about hospice care. My mother is difficult at the best of times. She's refusing to consider it unless I'm settled. She made air quotes with her fingers. Settled. Married. Alexandra rolled her eyes. She's from a different generation. Believes a woman isn't complete without a husband, despite my repeatedly pointing out that I run a company with over 500 employees and have never needed a man to validate my existence. Daniel couldn't help but smile at her indignation. Mothers have their own logic. Indeed. She took a sip of her coffee and grimaced. This is even worse than I remember. They fell into conversation easily after that, the way strangers sometimes do in liminal spaces like hospital waiting rooms, where normal social barriers seem less important. Daniel learned that Alexandra was the CEO of a tech company she'd built from the ground up. She learned that he worked construction but dreamed of starting his own carpentry business someday, that he made custom furniture in the tiny garage of his rented house when he could find the time. You should show me your work sometime, she said. My company is renovating our headquarters. We're always looking for unique pieces. Daniel laughed. I doubt my stuff would fit in a fancy office building. You'd be surprised what I like, she replied, and there was something in her gaze that made Daniel's heart beat a little faster. Their conversation was interrupted when a doctor finally appeared, calling for Noah Bennett. Daniel jumped to his feet, gently waking Noah, who blinked groggily. I hope everything goes well, Alexandra said as Daniel gathered Noah in his arms. Thanks for the coffee. And the company, Daniel replied, suddenly reluctant to leave. Mr. Bennett, the doctor called again. Coming, Daniel said, then turned back to Alexandra. Good luck with your mom. She nodded, and then he was following the doctor down the corridor, Noah's warm weight against his chest. The diagnosis was strep throat with complications, nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to warrant the emergency room visit. As the doctor wrote prescriptions and explained care instructions, Daniel felt the weight on his shoulders lighten slightly. Noah would be okay. That was all that mattered. It was nearly 4 de la mañana when they emerged from the examination room. Daniel was surprised to see Alexandra still in the waiting area, now pacing while talking quietly on her phone. She ended her call when she saw them. Good news, she asked. Strep throat. He'll be fine with antibiotics, Daniel said, relief evident in his voice. Any word on your mom? Alexandra's face tightened. They want to keep her for observation. He was just making arrangements to postpone my meetings tomorrow, today, actually. Noah, more alert now that he'd been given medication, looked up at Alexandra curiously. Who are you? He asked with a child's directness. I'm Alexandra. He was keeping your dad company while you were sleeping. Noah considered this. You're pretty, he declared. Alexandra laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. Thank you. I think you're pretty handsome yourself, especially in those dinosaur pajamas. They're not just any dinosaurs, Noah informed her seriously. They're specifically Jurassic period dinosaurs. My mistake, Alexandra said, equally serious. That's a very important distinction. Daniel watched this exchange with a strange feeling in his chest. It had been so long since he'd seen Noah interact comfortably with a woman. Since Melissa died, he'd been wary of strangers, especially female ones, as if afraid of replacing the mother he barely remembered. We should get going, Daniel said reluctantly. It's late, and this little paleontologist needs rest. Of course, Alexandra said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. If you ever want to show me that furniture of yours. Daniel took the card, their fingers brushing. Thanks. I hope your mom feels better. They said their goodbyes, and Daniel carried a drowsy Noah to the parking lot, tucking him into the booster seat of his beat-up truck. As he started the engine, he glanced at Alexandra's card. Alexandra Winters, CEO, Winters Innovation Technologies. Below her name was a phone number, handwritten, with the words "my personal cell" beside it. Daniel tucked the card into his wallet, telling himself he would never call. Women like Alexandra Winters didn't belong in his world. 3 days later, Daniel was fired from his construction job. His boss was sympathetic but firm. They couldn't keep someone who missed work unpredictably, no matter the reason. With Noah still recovering at home and no childcare, Daniel felt the panic rising. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and his savings wouldn't cover it. That night, after Noah was asleep, Daniel sat at his small kitchen table with bills spread before him, trying to figure out which ones he could delay paying. His eyes kept drifting to his wallet, where Alexandra's card was tucked away. Finally, in desperation, he pulled it out. What could it hurt to call? The worst she could do was say no to looking at his furniture. And if there was even a small chance she might be interested in commissioning something. Before he could talk himself out of it, he dialed the number. Alexandra Winters, she answered on the third ring, her voice crisp and professional. Hi, Uemi, this is Daniel. Daniel Bennett? From the hospital the other night? There was a pause, and Daniel was about to hang up in embarrassment when she spoke again, her tone warning. Daniel. I was hoping you'd call. Hopes no. Better, thanks. The antibiotics are working. He took a deep breath. Look, I know this is out of the blue, but you mentioned being interested in my furniture work, and I'm in a bit of a situation. I meant what I said, Alexandra interrupted. I'd love to see your pieces. Are you free tomorrow? I could come by your workshop. Daniel looked around his tiny kitchen, at the stack of bills, at the photos of Noah on the refrigerator. Tomorrow works, he said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. They arranged a time, and Daniel gave her the address of his house, warning her that his workshop was just a converted garage. After hanging up, he sat staring at the phone, wondering if he'd just made a huge mistake. The next day, Daniel spent the morning frantically cleaning the garage and arranging his best pieces, a hand-carved coffee table, a set of nesting end tables, a rocking chair he'd made when Melissa was pregnant with Noah. They just finished when a sleek black Audi pulled into his driveway. Alexandra emerged looking every bit the CEO in a navy blue dress and heels that probably cost more than his monthly rent. But her smile was genuine as she greeted him. This is quite a commute from your office, Daniel said, suddenly self-conscious about his modest home. I had meetings on this side of town anyway, she replied smoothly, though Daniel suspected this wasn't true. Now, show me what you've been hiding in this garage of yours. For the next hour, Daniel showed Alexandra his work, explaining his process, the types of wood he preferred, the joinery techniques he'd taught himself. To his surprise, she asked intelligent questions and seemed genuinely impressed. These are extraordinary, Daniel, she said, running her hand along the arm of the rocking chair. You're not just a craftsman, you're an artist. Daniel felt his face flush with pleasure. Thanks. It's just a hobby, really. It shouldn't be, Alexandra said firmly. You could make a living from this. Maybe someday, Daniel replied, the old dream stirring. Right now, I'm just trying to keep a roof over our heads. Lost my construction job yesterday. Alexandra's expression softened. I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do to help? Daniel shook his head quickly. I didn't tell you that to ask for charity. He was hoping you might be serious about commissioning something for your office. I am serious, Alexandra said. In fact, I'd like to commission several pieces. We're redesigning our executive floor, and I want something unique, not the mass-produced garbage most corporate offices have. She named a figure that made Daniel's eyes widen. It was more than he made in 3 months at his construction job. That's too much, he protested. It's the market rate for custom, handcrafted furniture of this quality, Alexandra countered. I'm not overpaying, if anything, you've been undervaluing your work. They negotiated terms, a deposit up front, a timeline for completion, delivery details. By the time they finished, Daniel felt lightheaded with relief. This commission would keep them afloat for months, maybe even give him time to look for more furniture clients. Thank you, he said simply when they were done. This means more than you know. Alexandra smiled. I should be thanking you. My board members are going to be impressed. She hesitated, then added, would it be alright if I said hello to Noah before I go? If he's feeling up to it. Daniel was surprised by the request but nodded. He's inside watching cartoons. They probably welcomed the distraction. Noah was delighted to see Alexandra, proudly showing her his dinosaur collection and chattering about his favorite books. Daniel watched from the doorway, a strange feeling in his chest as Alexandra sat cross-legged on the living room floor, giving Noah her complete attention despite her expensive dress. When it was time for her to leave, Noah asked innocently, will you come back again? Alexandra glanced at Daniel before answering. I'd like that, if it's okay with your dad. Anytime, Daniel said, and was surprised to realize he meant it. Over the next few weeks, as Daniel worked on the furniture commission, Alexandra became a regular presence in their lives. She would stop by to check on the progress of the pieces, always bringing something for Noah, a new dinosaur book, a science kit, once even tickets to a natural history museum exhibit. Daniel found himself looking forward to her visits more than he wanted to admit. There was something about Alexandra that drew him in, not just her beauty or success, but the glimpses of vulnerability she occasionally revealed. Like when she mentioned her mother's declining health, or admitted that despite her professional accomplishments, she often felt lonely. Most men are intimidated by me, she confessed one evening as they sat on Daniel's porch after Noah had gone to bed. They either want to compete with me or expect me to diminish myself to make them feel stronger. Daniel considered this. That sounds exhausting. It is, she agreed, sipping the beer he'd offered her. What about you? Have you dated since your wife passed? Daniel shook his head. Between work and Noah, there hasn't been time. And honestly, I wouldn't know where to start. Single dad with emotional baggage and financial instability isn't exactly a selling point. You'd be surprised, Alexandra said softly. Some people might see a man who loves his son and works hard against difficult odds. That's more attractive than you think. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Daniel thought she might lean in closer. But then her phone rang, her mother's care facility, and the moment passed. As Alexandra took the call, her expression grew increasingly troubled. When she hung up, she looked shaken. What's wrong? Daniel asked. My mother had another setback. The doctors are saying. She took a deep breath. They're saying it might be weeks now, not months. And she's still fixated on this idea that I need to be married before she goes. She keeps asking about my husband. I'm sorry, Daniel said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. Alexandra looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Daniel with an intensity that made his heart race. I have a crazy idea, she said. And you can absolutely say no. What is it? Come with me to see my mother. Pretend to be my husband. Daniel stared at her. What? Just for a visit or two, Alexandra rushed on. It would give her peace of mind. Says dying, Daniel. Ibe fought her on this my whole life, but now. I just want her final days to be peaceful. But why me? Surely you know other men who could. I don't want it to be just anyone, Alexandra interrupted. My mother is perceptive. She'd see through someone playing a part. But you and I, there's something real between us, isn't there? Even if it's just friendship. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. There was something between them, something he'd been trying not to acknowledge. What about Noah? He can't just leave him.